Darnell stepped off the bus just after 8 in the morning, the kind of early hour when the city still feels half asleep. The air smelled like wet pavement and coffee from the shop across the street. He adjusted the strap of his worn backpack, smoothed the front of his blazer, slightly too big, slightly wrinkled, and took a deep breath before crossing the street toward the glass-fronted office building. It wasn't flashy, but it had weight. Viridian Logistics, mid-sized, mid-tier, the kind of company most people wouldn't notice unless they worked there. But to Darnell it meant something more. He wasn't there as an intern, not officially. Technically, he was part of a youth leadership initiative, a program quietly funded by his family's foundation that gave young people from overlooked communities a chance to observe how real businesses operated behind the scenes. No fanfare, no name tags that said future CEO, just quiet observation. That was the point. See how things really worked when no one thought they were being watched. But no one at Viridian knew any of that. To them, he was just another teenager in a too big suit, probably lost or looking for a handout. And that was fine with him. He'd learned long ago that people showed their truest selves when they thought no one important was paying attention. The lobby was cool and quiet, the kind of sterile calm that comes from polished floors and hushed voices. He signed in at the front desk, handed over his ID, and waited while the receptionist printed a temporary badge. She barely looked up. "Third floor," she said, sliding the badge across the counter without making eye contact. He clipped it to his lapel, visitor, and headed for the elevator. By the time he reached the third floor, the office was buzzing. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the low hum of conversations about deadlines and deliveries. He stood near the entrance, unsure where to go next. That's when Gary Henshaw spotted him. Gary was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Broad-shouldered, salt-and-pepper hair combed back like he'd just stepped out of a 1990s corporate training video, and a voice that carried just a little too loudly. He walked over with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You the kid from the outreach thing?" Gary asked, arms crossed. Darnell nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm here to observe for the week." "Observe, huh?" Gary chuckled, glancing at his watch. "Well, we don't really have time for observers around here. But since you're here, you might as well be useful. Go make a pot of coffee, black, no sugar, and bring it to the conference room. And stay out of the way. We've got real work to do." There was no malice in the tone, not exactly. Just a casual certainty that Darnell's presence was an inconvenience, something to be managed. Darnell didn't flinch. He just said, "Sure thing," and turned toward the kitchenette. As he measured the coffee grounds and waited for the machine to gurgle to life, he listened. Not just to the sounds, but to the rhythm of the place. The stress in people's voices, the way some avoided eye contact with Gary, the nervous energy around the shipping logs on the shared drive. He'd been trained to notice these things. His grandfather used to say, "Power isn't always in the title. Sometimes it's in the silence between words." He delivered the coffee without a word, set the tray down quietly, and found an empty chair in the back corner of the open workspace. He pulled out a small notebook, not digital, just paper, and began to write. Not names, not accusations, just observations. Team meeting, 8:45 a.m. Gary dominates conversation. 2 employees exchanged glances when he mentioned accountability. No one challenged him. Throughout the day, people passed by his corner, some curious, most indifferent. A woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Lena dropped a stack of files on the desk next to him. "You can sort these if you're bored," she said, not unkindly. He thanked her and got to work. Alphabetical by vendor, then by date. Simple but orderly. He liked order. At lunch, he sat alone in the break room eating a sandwich from his backpack. Gary walked in, saw him, and paused. "You still here?" he asked, opening the fridge. "Yes, sir. Program runs all week," Gary snorted. "Hope you're learning something useful. This ain't school. Out here you gotta prove your worth." "I'm trying to," Darnell said simply. Gary didn't respond, just grabbed a soda and left. Later that afternoon, Darnell wandered near the receiving bay, just far enough to see, not close enough to interfere. He watched how packages were logged, how security badges were scanned, how the night crew prepared for shift change. Everything seemed routine, but something felt off. The supervisor kept glancing at his phone, and the camera above the bay flickered once just for a second before stabilizing. He noted it in his book. By 5 o'clock, the office had emptied out. Darnell packed up slowly, careful not to rush. As he passed Gary's office on the way out, he saw the man leaning back in his chair, feet on the desk, scrolling through something on his phone. Gary looked up, surprised to see him still there. "Heading out?" Gary asked. "Yes, sir." "You walk or take the bus?" "The bus." Gary nodded as if that confirmed something in his mind. "Be careful out there," he said, but it didn't sound like concern. It sounded like a warning wrapped in pity. Darnell just smiled. "I always am." That night, back in his apartment, a modest one-bedroom his family kept under a different name to avoid attention, he reviewed his notes. Not just what he'd seen, but what he'd felt. The tension, the unspoken rules, the way people moved around Gary like he was a storm they were trying not to get caught in. He called his legal advisor, Miss Ruiz, a woman who'd worked with his family for over a decade. "Day one," he said. "No red flags yet, but something simmering." "Trust your gut," she replied. "And remember, you're not there to fix anything yet. Just to see." "I know," he said, "but sometimes seeing is the hardest part." He hung up and looked out the window at the city lights. Tomorrow would be day two, and if today was any indication, things were about to get complicated. What Darnell didn't know yet, what no one in that office knew, was that Viridian Logistics hadn't just been struggling last year. It had been on the brink of collapse, and 6 months ago his family's trust had bought it outright, not for profit but for purpose, to rebuild it ethically, fairly, and with people at the center. But before any of that could happen, they needed to understand what was really going on inside. That's why Darnell was there, not as a boss, not as an owner, but as a witness. And witnesses, he'd learned, often see the truth long before anyone else is ready to admit it. The second morning started like the first, quiet, careful, and full of unspoken tension. Darnell arrived just before 8. Same thrift store blazer, same worn backpack, same calm expression that gave nothing away. He signed in, clipped on his visitor badge, and made his way upstairs without drawing attention. But something had shifted overnight. The office felt tighter, like everyone was holding their breath. By 9, the news had spread. A high-value prototype shipment, some kind of advanced logistics tracking device, had gone missing from the secure receiving bay. It wasn't just expensive, it was irreplaceable. The client was one of Viridian's biggest, and the delivery had been scheduled for that afternoon. Now it was gone. Panic moved through the floor like a ripple. Phones rang nonstop, managers huddled in corners, voices low and urgent. The usual morning chatter was gone, replaced by nervous glances and hushed whispers. Darnell stayed in his corner, watching, listening, but saying nothing. He didn't need to ask questions. People were talking enough on their own. Around 10, Gary stormed out of his office like a man with a mission. His face was red, his tie crooked, and his voice cut through the noise like a siren. "I want every camera reviewed. Every log checked. Someone in this building knows what happened." Security was called. The night supervisor was pulled into a conference room and questioned for nearly an hour. But the footage from the bay was glitchy. Just a blur of movement around 11:45 p.m. A figure in a dark hoodie slipping past the camera's blind spot. The timestamp flickered, then froze. Useless. That's when Gary's eyes landed on Darnell. He didn't say anything at first, just stared like he was piecing together a story in his head. Then he walked over, slow and deliberate, stopping just a few feet away. The whole floor seemed to go quiet. "You were down by the bay yesterday," Gary said, arms crossed. "Saw you hanging around after hours." Darnell looked up, calm. "I was observing the shift change. Part of the program." "Observing," Gary repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. "Funny thing, you show up out of nowhere and now something valuable disappears. You got any explanation for that?" A few people turned to look. Others pretended not to hear, but their shoulders stiffened. Darnell could feel the weight of their silence. "I didn't take anything," he said evenly, "and I was home by 7 last night. My bus pass logs show it," Gary snorted. "Bus pass? That's your alibi?" "I'm just saying I wasn't here." But Gary wasn't listening anymore. He'd already made up his mind. "You don't belong here," he said, voice dropping just enough so only those nearby could hear. "You walk in like you own the place, but you don't even know how this business works. And now we're missing 80 grand worth of tech. You expect me to believe that's a coincidence?" Darnell didn't flinch. He met Gary's eyes, not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet steadiness that seemed to unsettle the older man even more. "I expect you to look at the facts," Darnell said, "not jump to conclusions." But facts weren't what Gary wanted. He wanted a culprit, and in his mind Darnell fit the bill. Young, black, unfamiliar, and most damning of all, unaccounted for in the office hierarchy. No supervisor vouched for him. No department claimed him. To Gary, that meant he was expendable. By lunchtime, the rumor had twisted into something uglier. Whispers turned into stares. People moved away when Darnell walked by. Even Lena, who'd been kind the day before, avoided his eyes when he passed her desk. He ate alone again, this time in the stairwell instead of the break room. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, "Accusation made without evidence. Security footage incomplete." Gary focused on me. Why? He didn't feel angry. Not yet. More disappointed. Disappointed that someone in a position of leadership would rather blame a kid than dig for the truth. Disappointed that no one had spoken up. But he also knew something Gary didn't. Viridian's security system wasn't just about cameras. Every access point, doors, servers, even the coffee machine's maintenance panel was logged digitally. And those logs didn't lie. After lunch, while Gary was in a heated call with corporate, Darnell quietly approached the IT support desk. The tech, a soft-spoken guy named Eli, looked up from his screen. "Hey," Darnell said, "I was wondering. When the security footage glitched last night, did the system log any manual overrides?" Eli blinked. "That's actually a really good question. Most people only cared about what the cameras showed. But Darnell was asking about the system behind them, the invisible layer where real control lived." Eli hesitated. "I'm not supposed to share that stuff, but given what's going on, maybe I should check." "Just the facts," Darnell said. "No names. Just timestamps and access points." Eli nodded slowly. "All right. Give me a few." While he waited, Darnell walked back to his corner. He didn't pace, didn't fidget, just sat hands folded, eyes on the floor. But inside, his mind was racing. If someone had tampered with the feed, they'd left a trail. And trails could be followed. 20 minutes later, Eli appeared beside him, pale. "You need to see this," he whispered, holding out a printed sheet. Darnell took it. The log showed that at 11:47 p.m., the security feed for Bay 3 had been manually paused, remotely, from an internal admin account. Not just any account, one tied to a specific employee badge. Darnell's stomach dropped, but his face stayed neutral. "Thanks," he said quietly, folding the paper and tucking it into his notebook. Eli swallowed. "What do we do?" "We let the process work," Darnell said. "But first I need to talk to HR." He stood and walked toward the HR office, not fast, not slow, just steady. On the way, he passed Gary, who was now standing by the water cooler, laughing with two junior managers like nothing was wrong. Their eyes met for a split second. Gary's smile faded. Darnell didn't stop, didn't say a word, just kept walking. Inside HR, he asked to speak with the director, a woman named Ms. Tran. She listened carefully as he laid out what happened, the accusation, the lack of evidence, the security log. He didn't accuse Gary outright. He just presented the facts clean and clear. Ms. Tran's expression shifted from professional calm to deep concern. "This is serious," she said. "If someone tampered with security logs, that's a fireable offense. Possibly criminal." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Darnell said. "I just want the truth to come out." She nodded. "Then we'll get it. But I need you to stay on site for now. Don't leave the building." I wasn't planning to. Back at his desk, Darnell waited. The afternoon dragged. People kept glancing his way, but the energy had changed. Less suspicion, more curiosity. Something was happening behind the scenes, and they could feel it. At 4 o'clock, Gary was called into Ms. Tran's office. He walked in confident, arms swinging like he was going to set the record straight. He walked out 20 minutes later looking like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't look at Darnell. Didn't speak to anyone. Just grabbed his coat and left, muttering into his phone. The office exhaled. Lena finally approached Darnell's desk. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice low. "I will be," he said. She hesitated, then added, "We all saw what he did, and thank you for not letting it slide." Darnell just nodded. He didn't want thanks. He wanted fairness. That evening, as he waited for his bus, his phone buzzed. It was Ms. Ruiz. "Sounds like day 2 got interesting," she said. "You could say that," he replied, watching the city lights flicker on. "But it's not over." "No," she agreed. "It's just beginning." And as the bus pulled up, Darnell knew one thing for sure: tomorrow the real work would start. Because now the mask was off, and once people see the truth, they can't unsee it. The third morning arrived with a different kind of quiet, one that felt less like tension and more like waiting. People still came in, still made coffee, still checked their emails, but everything moved slower. Like the office itself was holding its breath. Darnell noticed it the moment he stepped off the elevator. Glances weren't suspicious anymore, they were curious. Nervous even, and Gary? He hadn't shown up yet. Darnell took his usual seat in the back corner, but this time no one treated him like he didn't belong. A few people nodded as he passed. Lena left a fresh cup of coffee on the desk beside him without saying a word. He smiled quietly and took a sip. It was black, no sugar, just how he liked it. By 9, Ms. Tran called a short all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Not the kind with agendas or presentations, just a calm, firm update. An internal review is underway regarding the missing prototype and related security concerns, she said, standing at the front with her hands clasped. Until it's resolved, all access protocols are tightened. No exceptions. She didn't name names, but everyone knew who she meant. Gary's absence spoke louder than any announcement. After the meeting, Darnell stayed behind. He asked Ms. Tran if he could review the full system logs. Not just the security feed, but server access, shipping records, even vendor communications. She hesitated, then nodded. "You've earned that trust," she said simply. In the IT room, Eli pulled up the data on a secure terminal. What they found wasn't just about one missing package. It was a pattern. Gary hadn't just paused the camera the night the prototype vanished. He'd done it twice before, on nights when high-value test shipments arrived. Each time the items disappeared from inventory but never showed up on delivery logs. And each time a private courier, unlisted, unverified, had been signed in under Gary's authorization. But the real kicker: the payments. Buried in expense reports were reimbursements for vendor coordination fees tied to a shell company with a vague name, Horizon Solutions Group. Eli ran a quick cross-check. The business address was a mailbox in another state. The phone number disconnected. And the bank account linked to Gary's personal details. Darnell leaned back in his chair, stunned but not surprised. It wasn't just theft, it was a system. Carefully built, quietly maintained, and shielded by years of unchecked authority. "He's been doing this for months," Eli whispered, eyes wide. "Maybe longer," Darnell nodded. "And he thought I was the easy target." Just then, his encrypted phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped into the hallway to answer. It was his legal advisor. "We've confirmed it," she said, voice low but steady. "Viridian Logistics is fully owned by the Carter Family Trust. The acquisition was finalized 6 months ago. You're not just an observer. You're the designated oversight representative. That means you have full authority to act." Darnell closed his eyes for a second. He'd known this, of course. But hearing it out loud, knowing he could step in, stop this, fix it, felt heavier than he expected. "Do you want to reveal your role?" she asked. "Not yet," he said. "Not until we have everything documented. Gary's not the only problem here. This kind of rot doesn't grow in a vacuum." He hung up and walked back inside. Over the next few hours, he and Eli worked quietly, pulling records, saving copies, building a timeline. They didn't rush. They didn't gossip. They just gathered truth, piece by careful piece. Around noon, Ms. Tran approached Darnell's desk. "Corporate wants a full briefing by end of day," she said. "They're taking this seriously." "Good," he replied, "because there's more." He handed her a printed summary. Just the facts, no drama. Missing shipments, fake vendors, falsified logs, unauthorized system access, and at the center of it all, Gary Henshaw. She read it in silence. When she looked up, her face was grim. "This goes beyond theft. This is fraud. And if HR knew even a fraction of this..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Why didn't anyone say anything sooner?" Darnell thought about that. "Because people get used to things," he said. "Especially when speaking up feels risky." She nodded slowly. "Well, that ends today." By mid-afternoon, corporate security arrived. 2 calm professional people in plain clothes who asked for Gary's office to be sealed. They didn't make a scene. Just locked the door, changed the digital access codes, and began copying his hard drive. Still, no one knew who Darnell really was. To most, he was still just the quiet kid from the youth program, who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But a few, Lena, Eli, Miss Tran, were starting to wonder. Then, at 3:30 p.m., Gary showed up. He walked in like nothing had happened, tie straight, coffee in hand. But the moment he saw the sealed office door, his face went pale. He turned to the nearest employee. "What's going on?" No one answered. He stormed toward HR, but Ms. Tran met him at the door. "You're not cleared to be here today, Gary." "What are you talking about?" "I run this floor." "Not anymore," she said firmly. "You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." His eyes darted around, landing on Darnell. For the first time, there was fear in them, not just anger, but real, raw fear. He took a step forward. "You did this," he hissed. Darnell stood slowly. "I didn't do anything but ask questions. You did the rest." Gary opened his mouth to argue, but corporate security stepped in gently but firmly. "Let's go, sir." As they let him out, the entire floor watched in silence. No cheers, no jeers. Just relief, quiet, deep, and long overdue. After he was gone, Darnell sat back down. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. It wasn't over. Gary would fight back. There would be lawyers, denials, maybe even threats. But the truth was out now, and it couldn't be stuffed back in the box. Later that evening, as he waited for his bus, Lena joined him at the stop. "You know," she said after a while, "most people would have walked away after what he said to you, called it unfair and left." Darnell shrugged. Walking away wouldn't have fixed anything. She looked at him, really looked at him. "Who are you, really?" He smiled faintly. "Just someone who believes people deserve better." She didn't press. Maybe she already knew, or maybe she just trusted what she'd seen. Back at his apartment, Darnell spread the documents across his kitchen table, photos of fake invoices, screenshots of system logs, notes from employees who'd finally spoken up. It wasn't just evidence, it was a story of how power, when left unchecked, can twist even the most ordinary workplace into something broken. But it was also a story of courage, small acts, quiet voices, people choosing to do the right thing even when it was hard. He called Ms. Ruiz again. "We're ready," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For the next step." And as he hung up, he knew tomorrow wouldn't be about blame anymore. It would be about rebuilding. Because once the rot is cleared away, there's room for something better to grow. The morning of the fourth day felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer, like fog had lifted and the path ahead was finally visible. Darnell didn't arrive in his usual thrift store blazer. Instead, he wore a dark navy suit, simple but well cut, the kind that didn't shout but didn't need to. His backpack was gone. In its place was a slim leather portfolio. He still signed in at the front desk, still clipped on a badge, but this time, it didn't say visitor, it said oversight. The receptionist blinked, then quickly looked away, suddenly very busy with her keyboard. Upstairs, the office buzzed with a new kind of energy. People weren't just working, they were watching, waiting. Word had spread quietly overnight. The kid everyone dismissed was coming back. And this time he wasn't sitting in the corner. Ms. Tran met him at the elevator. She didn't smile, but her posture softened. "Conference room B," she said. "They're all there." Inside the room sat 5 people, 2 from corporate leadership, the head of internal audit, the newly appointed chief ethics officer, a woman with sharp eyes and calm hands, and Gary, who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, and his usual bluster had been replaced by a jittery silence. Darnell walked in without hesitation. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he placed his portfolio on the table, opened it slowly, and laid out a single sheet of paper, the summary of findings. Then he took his seat. "I asked for this meeting," he began, voice steady, not to accuse, but to clarify. Gary scoffed. "Clarify what? That you've been playing some kind of undercover game this whole time?" "No," Darnell said, meeting his eyes. "To clarify that your actions affected real people, not just the company, but the team you were supposed to lead." He turned to the corporate leaders. "Over the past 6 months, Mr. Henshaw created a side operation using company resources. He rerouted high-value test shipments to a private courier under a shell company called Horizon Solutions Group. He falsified expense reports to cover the losses. And when a prototype went missing last week, instead of investigating, he blamed the only person in the room he thought no one would believe." He paused, then added, "Me." One of the executives leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Darnell nodded. Every transaction, every system override, every fake invoice, it's all documented. IT has preserved the logs. Finance has flagged the payments. And 3 employees have submitted written statements about pressure they faced to look the other way when shipments didn't match records. Gary's face tightened. Those people are lying. They're scared because they're guilty too. No, Darnell said gently. They're speaking up because they're tired of being afraid. Then something unexpected happened. The door opened, and Lena stepped in, followed by 2 other employees Darnell recognized from the shipping and accounting teams. They didn't say a word. They just stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes locked on Gary. The message was clear. You're not alone in this, but neither is he. The chief ethics officer finally spoke. Mr. Henshaw, do you deny accessing the security system remotely on the nights in question? Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around the room like he was searching for an escape that wasn't there. I might have paused the feed once or twice, he muttered, but only to test system vulnerabilities. It was part of my job. Your job didn't include creating fake vendors, the auditor said flatly, or depositing company funds into a personal account. Silence filled the room. Darnell didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, you assumed I was nobody. That's why you thought you could point at me and walk away clean. But ownership isn't about titles you see on a badge. It's about responsibility, and you forgot that a long time ago. Gary stared at him, really looked at him for the first time, not as a kid, not as a threat, but as someone who saw everything. And in that moment, the last of his defiance crumbled. I didn't think anyone would notice, he whispered. The company was struggling. I figured a little extra wouldn't hurt. A little extra, Lena said from the back, her voice quiet but sharp. You called me lazy last month because I asked for overtime pay. Said I didn't understand how business works, but you were stealing while we skipped lunches to meet your deadlines. Gary didn't answer. He just looked down at his hands. The meeting ended shortly after. Gary was formally terminated on the spot. His access was revoked, his company devices collected, and he was escorted out by security, this time without protest. As he passed Darnell in the hallway, he stopped for just a second. I didn't know who you were, he said, almost to himself. Darnell met his gaze. That's exactly the problem. After Gary was gone, the real work began. Darnell didn't leave. He stayed through the afternoon, working with HR and the ethics team to draft a plan. Not just to fix what was broken, but to make sure it couldn't happen again. They reviewed hiring practices, updated whistleblower protections, and set up anonymous reporting channels that went straight to corporate oversight, bypassing local management entirely. But Darnell knew policies weren't enough. Culture was the real fix, so he did something simple. He walked the floor. Not as a boss, not as an owner, but as a person. He asked people how their day was going. He listened when they talked about bottlenecks in shipping, frustrations with outdated software, ideas for improving morale. He remembered names. He remembered stories. By late afternoon, a small group had gathered near the break room, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They asked questions. He answered honestly. No corporate speak, no jargon, just real talk. One young employee, barely out of high school, finally asked, Are you, like the owner or something? Darnell smiled. I represent the people who own the company, yeah. But more than that, I'm here because I believe this place can be better. And it starts with treating everyone like they matter. That night, as he walked to the bus stop, his phone buzzed. It was Ms. Ruiz. How'd it go? She asked. He's gone, Darnell said. But the work's just starting. Proud of you, she said simply. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then I keep thinking about what he said. I didn't know who you were. Like that excuses it. It doesn't, she replied. But it explains why people like him fall. They only see what they expect to see. They never look deeper. Darnell watched a delivery truck rumble past, its lights reflecting in the wet street. Then I guess my job is to make sure people look deeper. And as the bus pulled up, he knew tomorrow wouldn't be about punishment anymore. It would be about trust. About showing that leadership isn't about power. It's about seeing people, really seeing them, and giving them room to grow. Because when you do that, the whole place changes. Not overnight, but surely. And that's how real change begins. The 5th morning dawned soft and steady. The kind of day that feels like a fresh page. Darnell arrived at the office not in a suit, not in a blazer, but in a clean button-down and dark jeans, clothes that said he was here to work, not to perform. He still signed in at the front desk, but now the receptionist greeted him by name. Upstairs, people didn't just nod, they smiled. Some even said good morning like they meant it. It had only been a week, but the air in the office had changed. Not because someone had been fired, but because something deeper had shifted. Trust was starting to grow back. Darnell didn't hold meetings. He didn't make grand announcements. Instead, he spent his first hour walking the floor, stopping to talk with the night shift crew, asking the warehouse team about their biggest headaches, listening as the customer service reps described how outdated software made simple tasks feel impossible. He took notes, not in a fancy tablet, but in the same small notebook he'd used since day one. By mid-morning, he met with Ms. Tran and the new interim operations lead, a woman named Priya who'd been with the company for 12 years, but had never been given a real shot at leadership. "You know this place better than anyone," Darnell told her. "What would you fix if you could?" She didn't hesitate. "Start with respect," she said. "Pay people fairly. Listen when they speak. And stop treating the warehouse like it's separate from the office. We're all part of the same chain." That afternoon, Darnell called a short all-hands huddle, not in a conference room, but right in the open workspace, chairs pulled into a loose circle. No PowerPoint, no corporate script, just him, standing in the middle, hands in his pockets. "I'm not here to run this place," he said. "I'm here to help you run it better." He laid out 3 changes, simple but meaningful. First, a new mentorship program pairing senior staff with younger employees, not just for training, but for real guidance. Second, a monthly Fix-It forum, where anyone could pitch one idea to improve operations, with the best one getting fast-tracked and funded. Third, a full review of pay equity across departments, starting with the warehouse and customer service teams who'd long been underpaid compared to office roles. People didn't clap. They leaned forward. Because for the first time it felt like someone was speaking to them, not at them. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly, but not chaotically. The legal team wrapped up the investigation into the missing shipments. Gary faced criminal charges for fraud and tampering with evidence. The shell company was shut down. The stolen prototype? Recovered from a storage locker under his name, but Darnell didn't dwell on the past. He focused on the future. He worked with HR to redesign the hiring process, removing biased language from job posts and adding blind resume reviews for entry-level roles. He pushed for flexible hours for parents and students. He even convinced corporate to invest in new logistics software that cut reporting time in half, something the team had been begging for years. And through it all, he stayed visible. Not as a figurehead, but as a presence. He ate lunch in the break room. He helped move boxes during a system outage. He remembered that Lena's daughter had a recital and asked how it went. He learned that Eli wanted to study cybersecurity and connected him with a training program funded by the foundation. People started calling him Darnell, not Sir or Mr. Carter, and he liked that just fine. 3 months in, the first Fix-It forum took place. A young warehouse worker suggested installing better lighting in the loading bay after 2 near-miss accidents. It was approved on the spot. A customer service rep proposed a chatbot to handle routine inquiries, freeing up staff for complex issues. That got fast-tracked too. Each idea, no matter how small, was treated like it mattered because it did. The real test came during the quarterly review. Corporate leadership expected a report full of damage control, lost revenue, reputational risk, turnover. Instead, they got something else: rising morale scores, faster shipment times, fewer errors, and a 30% increase in internal referrals. People weren't just staying, they were bringing their friends. At the end of the meeting, the CEO leaned back in his chair and said, "You didn't just clean up a mess. You rebuilt the foundation." Darnell shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. The team did. I just gave them space to be heard." Back at the office, he found a small envelope on his desk. Inside was a handwritten note from the night shift supervisor. "Thank you for seeing us. Not just our work, us." He tucked it into his notebook right next to his first observation from day one. Team meeting, 8:45 a.m. Gary dominates conversation. 2 employees exchanged glances when he mentioned accountability. No one challenged him. Now those same employees led meetings, spoke up in reviews, mentored new hires. The glances weren't nervous anymore. They were full of quiet confidence. Darnell never made a big show of his role as the trust's representative. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any title ever could. And slowly the story of what happened, the accusation, the truth, the turnaround, spread not as gossip, but as a quiet lesson. Never underestimate the person you think doesn't belong. One evening, as he waited for his bus, Lena joined him again. "You could have walked in here with lawyers and demands," she said. "But you didn't." "I didn't want to fix a company," he replied. "I wanted to help fix a community. This place is part of it," she nodded. "Well, whatever you did, it's working," he smiled. "It's not me. It's all of you finally believing you deserve better." As the bus pulled up, he thought about his grandfather's words again. Power isn't always in the title. Sometimes it's in the silence between words. But now he'd add something of his own. And sometimes it's in the courage to speak up when no one expects you to. The story didn't end with a dramatic courtroom scene or a viral video. It ended with people showing up to work feeling seen, valued, and trusted. It ended with a warehouse that ran smoother, a team that laughed more, and a culture that chose fairness over fear. And for Darnell, that was enough. Because real change isn't loud. It's steady, it's human, and it starts not when someone takes control, but when they give others the chance to rise.